So it's my turn to take over here, right? Okay, well, I hope everyone is looking forward to this as much as I am. That's an unusual topic, and some people have asked me why I chose this topic, and I actually didn't. I was just invited to speak about it, and it sounded like a very interesting topic because I'd never spoken about this before. I do lecture about a wide range of health topics, everything from mental health, physical health, and allergies and thyroid. But this is something I haven't spoken about, so it's going to be a lot of fun. And at my age, 78, it's a good time to take a look at this because in just 22 years, I'll be 100 years old. So I have good chances of reaching 100 and going beyond, but it's probably time to already start thinking about it. So I have prepared a PowerPoint program. I find it's very good in this Zoom setting because then I don't forget anything. And as I've understood now, there's no time limits on this one, so I can really just take it easy and go through everything. I tend to speak fast when I do these programs because I try to get a lot of information into a short time. And so this will be a really relaxed time together because I'm just going to talk at my normal speed. And there'll be plenty of time for questions and answers. So if you have any questions, and I'm happy to answer them.
I'll just interrupt for a moment to say that any of you who are looking forward to Carl Ferret sharing the platform together with Steve, he's asked if he could postpone his appearance and he'll reschedule as soon as he can. I mean, no good reason. So that gives Steve plenty of time to be relaxed.
Okay. And before I begin, I'd like to quote one of my favorite authors. That was Alan Watts, who was a Christian pastor who became one of the first Westerners recognized as a Zen Roshi master, Zen Buddhist master. And he said, to grasp all the things that are beyond the realm of our worldly life, we would need the combined power of 20 brains. So since I only have one brain, anything I say, of course, will be limited and a bit of my speculation, but it certainly is I think, a good foundation for a discussion about this very interesting subject. So a bit about myself first. You can hear I'm from North America originally, but I've spent most of my adult life living in Europe, and now the last 22 years or so, half the year in Australia. So I do get around. And I'm going to talk about some things this evening that kind of relate to me personally because I felt driven to do some of the things that I do really early in life. And I think that there was a meaning for that. So this is something that I began early. I became interested in yoga. And yoga gave me a lot of interesting insights into Eastern thought. And I began experimenting with different detox and cleansing methods of yoga. And then along came macrobiotics, almost 53 years ago. And I just immediately was mesmerized by it. I found that my body responded to macrobiotic food, to the balance of energies that macrobiotics is about. And here I am after all these years. I haven't seen a doctor once since I began my macrobiotic journey. Some people would think I'm bragging, but actually it's just the natural consequence of eating the kind of food and living the kind of life that the human body is meant to do, and then it takes over itself. I'm sure many of you have been as frustrated as I have been through the whole, let's say, the hysteria of the pandemic of the last few years, that there was hardly a mention of natural immunity, which there should be, because natural immunity is much better than all these concoctions that the medical establishment comes up with. And we're still hearing about these problems now, it's still not settled. And I've gone through this whole time with no fear at all, no need for any kind of medical intervention, and feel like this is all just part of the life that I started many years ago. Macrobiotics has been my main focus of my professional life too, because I do professional health coaching, and I worked for some years in Germany at a medical clinic dealing especially with cancer patients, and gave me a special kind of, let's say, slant on macrobiotics, which is also looking at the biochemistry of the body and things like minerals and vitamins, which are very important. So that's a bit of my background, but this time I'm not going to be going into that kind of thing. We're going to look more about the overview, because macrobiotics really is about total health, optimal health. And the question is, what do we want to do with the health? Is it just to be healthy? And of course, it isn't just that. Health is the means to really experience life to its fullest. And when we see all the craziness going on in the world, we can be happy if we're, those lucky souls who can focus on our own development and helping others to move along the way, because sickness really holds people back. Buddha was known as the compassionate one, having great compassion. And it's very difficult to have compassion for others when you're hurting yourself. You're so involved with just managing your own situation. There's not a lot left over for compassion for others. When we're healthy, then we have that access to be interested in helping others along the way. I will probably speak, I don't know, about an hour. I haven't practiced this. I put these slides together just spontaneously, so we'll see where it goes. And the good thing about Zoom is that if this gets to be too much, you can just click off and go do something else for a while if you don't disturb anyone. And with that, I think I'll go over to my PowerPoint program, hoping that the things work well here. Let's see now if I can make this work the way I want it to. Yeah, so there. Okay, now I've got to get back to trying to get to the point where I can here, let's see, here we are. If this goes, no, I'm not doing that there now. That's not right. Trying to get to the point of sharing this. And when I practice it, it works okay. Let's see, do you have to, okay, after the slight problem with the technical part, I've got my PowerPoint program up. So this is called Life on the Way to the Transition Called Death. And this is macrobiotic insight into Dharma and Karma, especially a couple of things to look at. And we'll see what each of those are. So the transition called death, in other words, death isn't the end, it's a transition, what we're talking about. So first, of course, we want to ask, why are we focusing on death? Well, I would say that, first of all, it's a good reminder that there's no time to waste, because there's no guarantee that any of us will be here tomorrow. And a wise man once said, or maybe more than one wise man has said, that we should live life as if every day were our last day on earth. Then there's no wasting time, there's no the usual things that kind of hold us back. But also, it's to focus on the intertwining of life and death, because they go together. The moment we're born, we're already programmed to die. And because in our society there's an aversion to death, there's a fear of death, it's good to see that in the greater context so that we don't fear it. We see it as part of the cycle of nature. And the cycle of seasons is the one cycle which is reliable. We can all count on the seasons changing. Here in the Northern Hemisphere at the moment, we have the leaves falling, or they have fallen, and that in American English is called fall. And it is with the idea that the next spring is already on the horizon, which is the new birth. And this is what goes on day and night, summer and winter. Things are in cycles. So it seems also that looking at the soul, that we would also go in cycles rather than having a short blip of light and then kind of disappearing into nothing. So the idea is that everything flows, the flow of nature, the Tao, and our purpose is to just let go and not cling to anything. We don't cling to life, we can let it go. We don't cling to any one religion, which is often our parents' religion. Now, I began life growing up in a Jewish breakaway sect called Christianity. And I was in the group that did not agree with the Catholic idea that the Holy Father is a connection to God. So I was a Northern European Protestant. And I was satisfied with that because I thought it was kind of silly, the idea that a group of men get together and decide that someone else is now the contact to God. And that was fine, but I've always had an open mind. And then when I began with yoga and looking more at Eastern religion and Eastern thought, I became intrigued by the ideas of Eastern religion, which is a different focus than Western religion. In Western religion, we think of God as, something separate, like we're all in a bag of skin, and we think of God as also kind of like a bag of skin because he could, get angry with us or whatever. It's like separate from us. In the Eastern thought, there's no limit to God. There's no personal limits there. It's just God is everywhere. So it's a different kind of religion. So I became interested in that and began reading Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, and I found these subjects of karma and dharma and reincarnation very interesting. And so I didn't feel any kind of conflict with my Protestant background from Christianity. So I would say that as a basis to go into the subject, we all need to overcome closed minds and have open minds. I'm sure that anyone following this program here is already pretty open-minded because these are kind of things that closed-minded people are not interested in. But we do know closed-minded people around us. So the Taoist motto, the Taoist principle is Wu Wei, which means do nothing. It's also translated as without effort. And it just means go with the flow of nature. And I chose this for the title of my book. So this is really it. But we know we're all going to die, and so we go with the flow, and we have no problem with that. We know our time will come, and when it comes, then we want to go as is like with the leaves falling. We wouldn't try to keep the leaves from falling off the trees, and we wouldn't try to stop ourselves from dying. So there it is, the great Tai Chi. That's this yin-yang symbol in the middle there. I chose this symbol for the book because it shows the dynamic movement involved in these energies of yin and yang. Usually we see a stable ball that doesn't have movement in it, but does show the opposite energies. The author or the artist that made this one, I thought, captured the real essence of the yin and yang, and that they're really moving, and aren't those definite limits or borders that we would see. So it's for a longer, healthier life, and that's because if you follow the laws of the Tao, which is the natural order, then you will live longer, or so you have better chances of living longer. And that's, of course, the whole point. So let's look at Eastern wisdom for the West. So we have the natural order, Tao, which is cyclical. And as I mentioned before, the soul also has seasons. There's a young season, which is like spring, and then the full adult time, summer, and then we go into the fall, which is later on in life. And then we're coming towards the end of life, and then it starts all over again. So this is what we would think of as reincarnation. So it goes life, death, and then life again. So I borrowed something from Alan Watts again. I used to read his books. I was fascinated by him. It's one of my introductions to Eastern thought, actually. He wrote a book called The Book on the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are. And he used a very interesting word. He said, if we have memory, looking at the cyclical nature of our existence, if there's memory, there's probably also forgettery. Now, for those that don't speak English as a native language, the word forgettery doesn't exist. That was his invention. So we have memory, forgettery, memory, forgettery. And of course, it means that if there is reincarnation, then we really do need the forgettery. Imagine how difficult it would be to negotiate a life if you had the memories of several lifetimes before you, like violent deaths and all kinds of things that happened. The idea of reincarnation is more accepted than I actually thought. I looked up on the internet because I was interested when I was preparing this, how many people actually believe in reincarnation. And the estimations in the Western world are 20 to 25% of the population believe that reincarnation is real, which is more than I thought. It's basically like a chain of lives progressing towards perfection. And the idea makes sense because if you think of you're given a life and then you should make everything right in one life, but people have different circumstances. Some people may be born in a slum and have crime around them, and they'll grow up, seeing that as their reality, and we wouldn't expect them to have the same kind of progress in life that we'd see in someone who has had, say, very spiritual parents who get them off in the right direction when they're young. So having different lives and being able to move along, progressing towards perfection does make a lot of sense. Now, this has also been confirmed by children. I don't know if you've heard about a very interesting television series from the US that was called The Ghost Inside My Child. So you can check it out on the internet. The Ghost Inside My Child. These are parents who explain how their children describe previous lives, and they've actually gone into, which is easy to know with the internet, they've gone in and actually confirmed the details that their children have spoken of. Also hypnosis. I once met a psychologist in Portland, Oregon. I'm from Oregon originally. I met a psychologist who was interested in this because I was actually getting to be known about reincarnation because I read an article in the East-West Journal in 1975. That's a macrobiotic journal at the time. And there was a special edition on reincarnation. And there was an exercise, a very simple exercise anyone could do. And so I read it. I came home from my job and I looked, it came with the mail. I read this article. Then my girlfriend came home and I said, "Hey, this is interesting. Let's try this. Here, lie down on the sofa and we'll try it." So she did. She just come home from work too. And about 15 minutes later, she was drowning when a dike broke in Holland. And she was throwing herself around the sofa as if she were really in the death throes of drowning. And this left an impression on me for sure. I just opened up this magazine and was reading this exercise. They do a very simple exercise. And I started doing this with a lot of people, and I got a reputation around Portland, Oregon that I did this. So a psychologist contacted me that he did hypnosis, like to help people stop smoking. And that when he did hypnosis with people, they would start talking about previous lives that they had lived. And this made him interested. Also, Edgar Cayce, many of you may know the great psychic Edgar Cayce, was a staunch Methodist and believer in just the way the Bible tells the story. And he became convinced of reincarnation just by looking at his the results of what he did with the people that he was involved with his psychic ability. So everything just points that way. I had no trouble believing that this was real, it was happening. And I also had the chance to prove that because I spent a year in Germany as an exchange student before, and I knew things about German life that most Americans wouldn't know. And when people would tell me about lives in Germany, I could hear the detail they were telling, like, some 20-year-old American kid who's mostly interested in baseball. describing the details of life in northern Germany, which is different than southern Germany. For most Americans, Germany is like Lederhosen and the Hofbräuhaus in Munich and that kind of thing. And in northern Germany, they would wear wooden shoes and have thatched roofs on their houses, like in Denmark. And so I knew that he was really telling me something that he was seeing in his visions and not something that he just thought up. In any case, it all confirmed my suspicions that reincarnation really happens. Then one evening I was driving home from Portland and I was listening to the radio, and a doctor who has a website called NDRF, that's Near Death Experience Research Foundation.org. Now, anyone who is dealing with the subject of death, I would recommend this because this doctor has archived masses and masses of stories of people who have passed over the other side and then been retrieved back into life, like the heroic work of the emergency medical team, and instead of you slipping away, you come back. And I'm sure you've all heard of those things, been books written about them. But NDRF is a there are other near-death experience websites, but this one was the first one I found. And it's when you read these things, you see, first of all, people are so overwhelmed by the feeling of love on the other side that they don't want to come back. And then they're told, well, your time hasn't come yet, you go back. And well, but I want to, back to the world where you forget your car keys and things like that. I want to just stay here in this, wonderful world of love and beauty. Also children. When children tell their stories, it's especially impressive because they have nothing they can, say, well, they believe in reincarnation, so they're telling what they believe in. But 4-year-old children just have nothing like that. So there's something called the Akasha Records, which is a cosmic memory field. It's somewhere, and if you can get in touch with this. Now, I am convinced that the reincarnation exercise that I learned from the East-West Journal put these people in touch with the Akasha Records, because the detail that they would explain these other lives in. And the Akasha Record is sometimes called the Book of Life. It's like a vibration that's encoded into our spirit, into our soul. And these are previous lives that we've experienced. And the best part about it is when you get involved in this kind of thing, there is no more fear of death. And that's a nice relief because there's so much fear of death. Imagine someone who is an atheist and believes that it's just this one short time and it's all over. That's a pretty grim thought when you die and have to leave all this behind, rather than just switching gears. So now we'll go to the next one. Whoop. Got stuck here. Oh, there we are. So here, Nostradamus is maybe known to some people. Al Stewart had a song about Nostradamus prophecies back in the 70s. I thought Al Stewart was a great songwriter and singer. I think it probably has the highest IQ of any of the pop singers of the time. Nostradamus prophecies, which were in quatrains, which means there are 4 lines. And he prophesied Napoleon and Hitler and, people who made a big splash on history. But I think that Nostradamus got in touch with the Akasha Records somehow. He said, I had a dream. I dreamed I stood alone, and the veil of all the years fell like and the veil of all the years fell from my eyes like a stone. That's the way it was. Yeah. So that's interesting stuff. Anyway, you can check him out if you're interested. So the role of reincarnation. Now, this is interesting because what I'm getting up to with this reincarnation is that the way we live our lives now is going to have a big impact on what happens when we leave this life. And we have something like the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Nag Hammadi texts, which you may be aware of, these old texts they found. These go back to a time when there was the basic Jewish religion, and the Christian variation of that hadn't really got going yet. The Gnostics were some of the first people there. There was no talk about Jesus. It was like these were the basic, the oldest religion, the Jewish religion, just getting a new slant. And reincarnation was actually mentioned in these texts. Like the Bible, as we know it, is not something that was just handed down from God, of course. It was put together by men, and it was censored. Some things they didn't want to have, they didn't put in there, and they just put this book together with different chapters that fit what they wanted to say. Reincarnation goes even back to ancient Greece. Socrates and Plato both spoke about reincarnation. And in the 6th century, Christianity banned the reference of reincarnation, but not until the 6th century. Until then, it was still hereabout. The Jewish Kabbalists were also very interesting. They still speak about soul transmigration. The idea is that a soul needs several lifetimes to correct itself, going for that point of perfection or the way it should be. The Kabbalah is a really interesting part of the Jewish religion, and of course, it's not something that's part of standard Jewish thought, but it's well enough known that it does have its followers. And I find it to be extremely interesting because Judaism is such an old religion, and so we have these things really going far back in time. Then there's Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist who probably is the most influential in making reincarnation mainstream. He analyzed thousands of children's cases of children speaking about previous lives, and confirmed that they were not just telling fantasies or fairy tales. They were actually speaking about former lives. I became interested in Paul Twitchell and Eckankar about 40 years ago. Found that very interesting, about how the soul balances karma. In other words, like the kind of things you do in life and the effect you have on others. And that when you get your balance of karma, you get far enough and you go into a state of basically spiritual bliss, where you no longer need to go back and do more lives, to learn how to correct yourself. And especially interesting to me was also Elizabeth Clare Prophet, who wrote the book Reincarnation, the Missing Link in Christianity. She was the spiritual teacher of the Summit Lighthouse. I think the books I've read about reincarnation, I think hers is the best. And I had the pleasure of meeting her personally because she invited me to the Summit Lighthouse to lecture about macrobiotics, because they consider the macrobiotic way of eating to be optimal for the development of the soul. And I found that quite refreshing, because generally the idea is that the soul is one thing and the body is another. The body is ephemeral, the soul is eternal. So let's just focus on the soul, but that's not the way to do it. So let's look at a contrast to the Western concepts now. Let's imagine you have just this general idea that you're born, and then when you die, you can go into this dark, everlasting nothingness, we could call it. That's really scary stuff. Everlasting nothingness. Anyone who's atheist will think that way, but even the standard Christian understanding is, you get judged by what you did in this life, and it could be worse than everlasting nothingness. Also, we see the way the medical establishment, they will put people on machines and keep them artificially alive just because there's some fear of death, when it would be better to just let them go, because it's pointless to just keep people alive on machines just because you don't want to let them die. Death is a natural part of the cycle. Being born is the beginning of the trip to death. Also, very important is the family mourning as death approaches. Like my mother is 96 years old now, almost 97, and when she dies, I'm not going to be mourning, and I think she's lived 20 years almost beyond the average life expectancy. And of course, she's going to die like we all are going to die. And when she dies, I will actually just be happy that she was lucky to have so much of life and to have such a good life. But when people mourn, if you see someone is dying and the people around are very much sad, it doesn't really give the person a good send-off into the other side. It should be more of a celebration of life. And of course, the heaven-hell concept that we have in Christianity is after a single life isn't really logical when you think about it. I mean, heaven, like you want to have, just kind of like a static state of rejoicing, doesn't really sound very interesting. And the hell concept, that's that's also just something that doesn't really fit with the idea of an ever-loving God. So there's a lot of problems with that. There are big holes in that whole idea. Next, I'd like to talk about theosophy and Madame Blavatsky. Now, theosophy was really a break. This is a Western look at Eastern mysticism. Madame Blavatsky, Helen Blavatsky, was the originator of that. She was inspired by Eastern mysticism, and this is where the Western thought first got going with the idea of reincarnation, karma, and was quite a refreshing new twist on things. So looking at theosophy, we'd say death is a transition to a higher vibration. So it's just you're vibrating at a higher level. And you is actually just a moving stream of consciousness. That's what a soul is. And we could even do it metaphorically, saying that new life arises from the ashes of the old. And doesn't that sound good? So then the next thing we ask is, why are we here? And as I mentioned before, I would suggest that it is to progress towards the perfection of the soul. And this takes several lifetimes. It's a big job. And with all of my faults, I'm sure that I need more than one lifetime to sort myself out. Also, we understand the interconnections of life. And this is how we all are interconnected, that what we do affects others, and how we can affect the outcome of our own lives and our own fate. Understanding the connection between body and mind, how the mind affects the body and the body affects the mind. These are often seen as separate factors in our health. Like, do you believe food is more important or is it stress? Well, when you eat well, you deal better with stress. You can't separate those. And the most important thing to remember here is that what we do now and the way we live, that sets the groundwork for the coming afterlife. And that's very important. So there's no greater task that we have in this life than to prepare ourselves for what comes after. Now, here's the basic insight. That is that the body is the crucial vessel for us to prepare for the afterlife. And that means physical and mental health. Because if you're not mentally healthy, how are you going to be able to even focus on things like what comes after life? This crazy guy who shot a lot of people recently, it happens all the time. These people are in such mentally chaotic state, they can't even manage their own lives. And they certainly will not be able to have abstract ideas about what comes after that. And what we know is that a clear nervous system is what enables proper thinking. So how do we have a clear nervous system? Well, it's scientifically well established. You have to have stable glucose, in other words, blood sugar. If your blood sugar isn't balanced, you can't concentrate, you can't focus, and you can even get aggressive, anxious, depressed. That's not the way to get yourself ready for the afterlife. Also, the mineral balance. Having a magnesium deficiency will affect your thoughts, zinc deficiency. So what it comes down to is that food provides the nutrients needed for a stable nervous system. The nervous system is our connection between the body and the mind. I can remember camping in the mountains of Oregon with my grandparents when I was young, about 10 years old. My grandfather was very good at outdoor things. And that's 60 some, well, almost 70 years ago. And that's all somewhere in the matter stored in my brain. But that's all matter. And if they did an autopsy of me, there'd be my brain to look at, but all those memories are still there. That's why the nervous system is so fascinating. It's the bridge between the body and the mind. And that's why it's so important that we eat well, because food is what will give us that balance in the nervous system. And of course, a lot goes on with that, but the food is the very basis. So Michio Kushi, one of my heroes, I have a lot to be thankful to him for. Michio Kushi took me under his wing and showed me how to do proper macrobiotic health coaching. I was preparing for a very daunting job at a German medical clinic dealing with cancer patients and others. And I wanted to get more experience behind me before I did that. And Kushi kindly took me into his home and gave me some tutoring that went on for a couple of weeks. And I felt much better, ready to take care of that. And Kushi also did spiritual seminars. He recognized the importance of food for our spiritual growth. And he had an interesting concept of the three worlds. He said the soul is first limited in the water world. That's the confines of the mother's womb. Very, very limited area. You know, we can kick a bit in there, but it's pretty much confined. And then when we're born, that's the end of the water world. And now we enter the air world. That's where we all now. We're all here at the air world. And we think of the possibilities we have in the air world compared to the water world. We see it's infinitely more. Like we can travel around the world and we can do this and that, all kinds of things we can do in the air world. And the point that Kushi made was that the air life comes to an end. And when it does come to an end, it's important that the mother's food and lifestyle during the water world was optimal so that our chances of doing it right in the air world will be great. And then what we do ourselves in the air world, that means healthy lifestyle with food, meditation, exercise, breathing, the whole thing, sleep. Then we make ourselves ready for the next transition, which is death. So birth is the end of the water world going to the air world. Death is the end of the air world going to the world of vibration. And the world of vibration is really interesting because this now has an infinite greater possibility than we had with Earth, just like the air world on Earth was so much greater than the water world, our first one. So this is something where it is so great we can't even comprehend it all. So in other words, food and lifestyle will shape the progress that we can make in the world of vibration because we're preparing for it now with our bodies in the air world. So Michio Kushi, there he is, great man. That was one of his quotes. You can read that yourself, but we're talking about energies, about how the energy of nature and the infinite universe are absorbed to the food we eat, and that food transfers into our thoughts and actions. So we couldn't say it better than that. One peaceful world. Wouldn't we love to have that? So his teacher was George Osawa, also one of my heroes. Osawa, I love this picture of him because as a traditional Japanese person, he was one of the first to really understand European culture. So here he is, you know, dressed up with his European clothes, showing his flexibility there. In fact, he wrote a book about the Western mentality because Japanese people had very little experience with Westerners, and you know, we think differently than they do. And his book was actually mandatory reading for Japanese officers in the Second World War. Like, you know your enemy. Another good model to think of for this development and progress are the 7 levels of judgment, which is a classic that many of you, I'm sure, know if you've dealt with macrobiotics. Osawa gave us this let's say, model for how we develop in consciousness. And that is that we begin very basically in life with mechanical. If we look at food as an example, we say that's like you're hungry, so you eat. I'm hungry, give me something to eat. That's mechanical. And then this goes on to the second level, which is sensory. I mean, now, we're experiencing things with our senses. Not only am I going to eat something because I'm hungry, but now I want to have something that tastes good. I like this kind of taste, I don't like that kind of taste. The third level is emotional. I've seen that in Sweden here, where I'm in Stockholm at the moment, that at Christmas, ham is the traditional Christmas food. And for many people, without ham, it's not really Christmas. That would be emotional kind of thinking, because, I don't eat ham, and I don't feel I suffer any kind of less of a holiday spirit because, I don't eat ham. But if you do get attached to those things, that's what is called emotional. Analytical is the fourth phase. Now, the fourth phase is interesting because this is where the body begins to transcend the self. In the first three levels, it's all ego. It's about me. In the fourth level, analytical, now we're kind of looking outside of ourselves and checking things out. For an example, when I do counseling, it's always interesting to hear what level people are at when they respond to my questions or to my suggestions. And if someone says, well, I want to eat that anyway because it tastes so good. And I say, yeah, but that's going to feed your cancer. Yeah, but it tastes so good. That's someone who's really, stuck in level 2. And level 3 was that, oh, but, my mother always gave me that and it made me always feel so comforted. And, I still like that. That would be emotional. But when you say at level 4, if that's going to feed my cancer, I'm not going to eat it, of course. That's analytical thinking. And I find in my personal experience that very few people actually are operating at the analytical level. It's mostly sensorial and emotional. But it really gets interesting here with social. Going to at social level, number 5, there you no longer really differentiate between yourself and others. Like if others aren't happy, I'm not happy. If you think of vegetarians, some vegetarians eat vegetarian because it's healthy. That's okay. That could be analytical. Others do it because they feel that if they take the animal food, which is a lot of plant food, like it takes a lot of grain and plant food to make the meat, that I'm taking food away from people who are poor. So I'm going to have the plant-based food because I want to free up our resources so others can eat. That would be social kind of thinking. And philosophical, number 6, is like macrobiotics. Things are yin and yang. We see the climates are cold, so we eat warm foods to balance the cold. That's the yang balancing the yin. That's a philosophical way of looking at things. And of course, number 7 is freedom. And that's where we want to go, is freedom, which also called satori. Freedom is where you no longer have any kind of limits. You do more, it's like a spontaneous, intuitive kind of thing you do. You do what's needed at the moment. So it's going beyond yourself and beyond this feeling of being a separate bag of skin. That's what we're talking about. So striving for intuitive freedom of satori, that's the goal. And all 7 levels are included in that. So this is a level we see a way of developing in life. So when life is over, we're now at the freedom level, and we're not still, sorry that we can't have Christmas ham. Now, Dharma. This is one of the words I had in the title. Dharma is your true calling. The word Dharma actually in Sanskrit means right direction or right living. But Dharma is actually your unique purpose. Like I found out my Dharma is to travel through the world and teach macrobiotic health, because that's what I do. And when I look back on my life, I can see that I was going that way. I started with yoga and detoxing things. I found macrobiotics, and first I was just getting it sorted out myself. And then people were asking me how they could be helped, and I started helping them. And then it just grew and grew. And then in the end, here I am now, after all these years, sharing my information with anyone who wants to listen. So that's my Dharma. And if you discover your Dharma, this is a great blessing. because it's a unique purpose. I have that unique skill. Like everyone's got their own skills. They can do this and that. Some people do it through music or art. And for me, my way of being creative is like doing a PowerPoint program. And I like to just concentrate down to the essence. What is the most important thing? The way we recognize our Dharma is by having a heightened sense of wisdom and discernment, being able to discern what is right. And then we discover, why were we sent to this life? And when you look at reincarnation, you discover that basically each life is like you're preparing for the next life. And the question is, why do you do this, take this life and not another life? It's going to be this one. Why are you going to these two parents? And what do you have to learn? So basically, Dharma means just follow your passion, and that will take you there. My passion is this. So I'll sit on airplanes sometimes, and because I do so much teaching, I'd like to just sit quietly and read a book. But the person sitting next to me sees I'm eating some strange travel food, and so asks me about it. And so I will spend a lot of time explaining all these things because I have a passion for explaining this. I know this is this person's only chance to contact this information, so I'm happy to do it. So we fulfill our Dharma when we serve and help mankind. That's a very noble goal. And I'd like to go in a little bit on Buddhism, the Buddhist path of Arhat and Bodhisattva. Now, if you look at Buddhism, you'll see that there are different thoughts, just like in the Jewish religion and Christianity, you have different kinds of people thinking different thoughts. But one of the interesting, you could say, opposition things is the path of the Arhat or the path of the Bodhisattva. The Arhat is totally focused on liberation, on that freedom, level 7 that Osawa told us about. So his life is about liberation, because when he frees his soul, he will have that kind of spiritual power to help others. The Bodhisattva has compassion as number one. Both the Arhat and the Bodhisattva are in the path of spiritual progress, developing towards that perfected soul. But for the Bodhisattva, the welfare of others always goes first. And Kuan Yin, the great Chinese goddess of mercy, was known as the great Bodhisattva, that she would do whatever it took to help other people. So I sometimes see this as a bit, now I wouldn't claim I'm on the path of Bodhisattva, I have too many human faults for that, but there's a little bit of Bodhisattva when you do macrolitic counseling, because people will contact me from all over, and I never tell someone I'm too busy, because I know that I can help someone else. So there's like a millimeter of Bodhisattva in what I do on my path to fulfill my Dharma. So again, it's the liberation or compassion. That's what we're talking about. Arhat, liberation, Bodhisattva, compassion. Both are good, of course. The Bodhisattva, to me, seems to be the higher path. Now, the path of the Bodhisattva includes something called virya. Virya is physical strength and effort. So here, it's not only that you have to meditate a lot and you have to go out and help other people, you have to have virya. And I think it's related to the words vigor, virile. The idea here is that if you don't have physical strength, physical prowess, it's very difficult to help others. And this is what's missing in a lot of the modern teachings of Buddhism. If we think at the time of Buddha, there was no ice cream, there was no chocolate. They didn't have to spend much time talking about that, because there just weren't all of these weird things that could make people sick. So, it was given some attention, but not so much. In our time, we need to spend more time on virya, what we need to stay strong and what it takes to be a bodhisattva. Let's be on the bodhisattva path. So Dharma is right living. It means like being in balance. And meditation is part of that, but meditation is very broad. You know, it can be prayer, chanting. Chanting is especially good because the decibels in that kind of meditation has a much stronger effect than if we do silent meditation. So you probably heard some of the Tibetan mantras. You know, we have a lot of Tibetan monks sitting in a hall and they're all chanting together. It's very powerful. Now, another thing I want to talk about is karma. Karma is action and reaction. So there's a lot of, let's say, confusion of what karma is. Let's say someone, you know, you say, my ex-wife, had a car wreck and got injured. I think that's her karma because she treated me so bad during the marriage, you know, that kind of thing. Karma is not like that. Karma is, it's a lesson. It teaches us lessons. So we learn. We're supposed to learn from our mistakes. So we set things in motion. We have actions. So people who kill other people, those are very serious actions, and they have very strong reactions. I sometimes think about some of these mass murderers who walk into schools and start shooting up children, you know, like what kind of karma they create that they'll deal with on the other side, even if they kill themselves and think they got away with it. So the key thing about karma is it's free will. In fact, it's like the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's where karma starts. Because if you don't do that, then there will be a reaction. And so then there's like a balance thing. You have to balance the karma. So those things that you've done that harm, you have to do other things that will balance that out, that are good. And again, it's not fatalistic thinking about, you know, it's just your karma. Karma is something with free will that can be changed at any time, and you know, we want to do that. So some deeds are selfless, others are selfish. So there's good and bad karma. Now, here's something I think really interesting that comes out of the Buddhist tradition. And that is that when you help and you heal, that you create good karma. In other words, this is the kind of actions that will be like a plus for your soul. But if you harm, this is the negative. This is the bad karma. But here's where it gets really interesting to me. That is that self-harm is also bad karma. So someone who, let's say, abuses alcohol, they destroy their health. That is the karma of self-harm. Someone who takes drugs, you know, ends up, you know, dying of an overdose of drugs. Very heavy karma of self-harm. But I would even say, being a hardcore macrobiotic, I would say that even eating a lot of ice cream every day is a kind of self-harm. As I've noticed, I've had a lot of people, a lot of men with prostate cancer. It's the #1 cancer in Europe and the US among men. And how many times they have told me that they eat ice cream by the bucket. They love it. And I started researching this and found that high calcium consumption is connected to prostate cancer. So like lots of cheese, yogurt, the whole thing. But ice cream, of course, is made from cow milk. So that's an interesting thing. But that's a bad karma to harm yourself. So positive karma is positive action: love, kind, honest, compassion. Negative, anger, hatred, greed, violence. So the goal is to balance karma because it's not fixed. In fact, I would say karma changes about like the Dow Jones Industrial Average does. If you watch it during the day, these figures just keep flipping back and forth, up and down, and depending on what kind of a day you're having, you know. You hope the little frail old lady across the street, you know, it just gone up. So it's basically just mathematics. You do something bad, you want to atone for it. And when people recall previous lives, they sometimes find that bad things they've done, like killing someone, may take more than one life to balance out again. So I wonder what happens to people like Al Capone, you know, and how they die. That's pretty heavy karma there, big part of the Chicago Mafia. So another point, now my book, it says eating the Wu Wei for a healthier, longer life. And one of the good results of that is that the longer you live, the more karma you can balance. But this means, of course, that you're living a good life. You're doing good things, because if you're doing bad things, it'd actually be better to die early, because you're just creating bad karma. But I think most of us here that are interested in this subject sitting here are really tuned into what I'm talking about, that we want to live longer so we can help more people. And that means that we balance more karma. And with the clear intuition that we get from this right living, we get connected to what's called our higher self. And the higher self, I think, is a very good concept. We have a higher consciousness that we can connect with when we're in balance. So the word religion actually means reconnecting. So there's actually I would call it a godlike, or we use the Latin word divine, energy around us that we can connect to. And the idea of religion is to reconnect with that energy. And it's not just to go through a certain number of rituals or this and that, but it's really a connection that we can all do by living the right way. And that's why we see many religions, maybe even most, have some kind of dietary instruction or rules or guidelines to follow at a certain time. Like Christians have Lent, and there's fasting. The Muslims have Ramadan, and it's a time when you will change the way you're eating, because it will have an effect on your soul, on your spiritual energy. So there it is, awareness through higher self. And I think I like to meditate. I do more mantra meditation than silent meditation. I find that when I do silent meditation, I get distracted. I start thinking about what I'm going to have for lunch or something. But when I do mantra meditation, I focus on the words themselves: Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, and the vibration of mantras has an energy in itself, and I can feel that energy. And it's a bit like having a well-balanced macrobiotic meal with brown rice and everything. So this is the point, to connect with the higher self. And I think that's also one of the great advantages of now being 78 years old. I think, I'm just maybe my imagination, but I think that I am actually getting better connected to my higher self, because as the years go by, I find that the important things become more important to me. Spend more time thinking about these ideas of what happens after I die. So now we'll come to the study of macrobiotics, one of my favorite subjects. So how do we get clear intuition? I would say it's by developing something called yang mind. Now, yang is a focus. It's very directed. It's disciplined. And if we're going to walk the spiritual path, this means we have to have self-discipline and focus, because if we spontaneously do whatever, then we don't really move forward. So how do you get a yang mind? First of all, you don't take things that are strong yin. Now, sugar is a good example. Macrobiotics, we recommend that you don't eat sugar. George Osawa, already 100 years ago, was telling people about the weakening effects of sugar. And I haven't eaten it voluntarily in all the years I've been macrobiotic. I've for sure had it sometimes in some kind of sauce or something along the way. But if I know there's sugar in something, like try this jam, I don't eat sugar. Yeah, but there's just very little sugar in this jam. Well, a little sugar is too much for me, so I won't try the jam. But if you eat like 50 kilos of sugar a year, which is, well, the estimates are 40 to 70 kilos of sugar a year. No one knows exactly how much. And many of us don't eat any sugar at all. This will create a yin mind. That means more scattered, not focused, not disciplined. Now, there's a time to be relaxed and kind of scattered, but if you want to make spiritual progress, you really need to focus and take time every day for those things that will bring you far forward. One of it is taking time to cook good food. And if we think of what intuition is something yin. Yin is an abstract kind of energy. Something yang would be like, say, the wind. You can feel the wind, it just blasts in your face. You can't see it, but you can feel it. It's got substance. Intuition comes softly, and it's delicate, and you have to be able to sense that. And that's yin. So just like masculinity attracts femininity, so yang and yin attract each other, and the yang mind will then attract yin intuition. So in other words, you wouldn't say, I'm going to go drink beer at the pub and I'll be back to meditate with you later on. You know, the alcohol will already cause a scattered brain, and so the meditation will be worthless. Do something else. Drink dandelion root tea before you're going to meditate. That's something that would give the yang mind. So then looking at it another way, yin and yang are always interesting to look at. If we say we have plant-based food is a light kind of food, and it makes us receptive to the energy flow from the universe. Whereas meat has a very dense energy, and it slows it down. So we're constantly being bathed by this energy from the universe. And if we eat plant-based food, then that energy will flow through us without stagnation. In Oriental medicine, stagnation is considered to be the basic cause of illness. Traditional Chinese doctors would say, water can flow 1,000 miles and it's always fresh, but as soon as it lands in a puddle, it suddenly becomes foul because stagnation creates problems. So that water is no longer something to drink if it's been standing around in a puddle. Well, that's what happens to the body when we have density. And I would myself include cheese, like hard cheese, as something that creates a lot of density in the body, as well as meat. That if you choose to do that, and of course that's a free will choice, you know, I'm not telling people not to do it, but if you're looking at it from the point of view of yin and yang, if you want to make spiritual progress, then you will need to do more meditation to create that flow, so you'll move better through the density that meat creates. Now, that doesn't mean that every piece of meat you eat would be a problem. I'm not saying that, you know, I'm not talking about radical diet here. What I'm talking about is meat generally creates density, so don't have much of that, is what I'm saying. And if you eat none, you can do it without also, but for some people that's too radical. So a mantra, which is a yin, you know, Om Mani Padme Hum, that is a good way to balance the density of the yang. So if I were to eat meat, it has happened when I'm invited along the way, if it's good quality, I have done it. It doesn't happen often, but it has happened. Then I will do mantras, because I know that the mantras will create the flow again that gets slowed down. We could also say that macrobiotic food is very much like of the traditional Eastern adepts, the sages, the wise men of the East. And that makes it so especially interesting. Ketogenic food is a new invention, but it's really popular among young people now. And in fact, a lot of young people have no idea even what macrobiotics is, but it doesn't have a tradition like macrobiotic food is the kind of food people have eaten for ages. So here we have the balance of yin and yang in food. So we're always thinking about the balance now, because the balance in the food, as Michio Kushi told us, creates the balance in our bodies, and that balances with the universe, which is also a yin and yang harmony. So this picture I've taken from the cover of a book I wrote in German in 1989. That was the year the Berlin Wall came down. And I wrote in the book that the yang energy, the dense, compact energy, can be seen in whole grains. And the yin, or expanded energy, the light, relaxed energy, can be seen in sprouts. So the graphics department of the publisher, Goldman, in Munich, they created this image of yin and yang on the cover of the book. and it won a graphics award for the best book cover, graphics book cover for the spring of 1989. They give this awards twice a year, once for spring and once for the fall editions. So they did a great job. They read the book and then they did this. When I wrote my English book, I was working with a publisher at first, and they thought they weren't going to make any money with my book, so they released me from the contract, and I published it myself. They had some professional cover designer give me a proposal for what the book should be, and it was just a lot of colorful vegetables all over. And they were pretty, but about a quarter of them were nightshades. Now, nightshades are potatoes, tomatoes, bell peppers, eggplant, chili, tobacco, and they all contain some form of nicotine. So macrobiotically speaking, we put them in the extreme group and say don't have those very often. So the last thing I would want to have is a book cover full of these colorful but toxic vegetables. So it showed it really pays, if you're going to be the graphics department, to read the book before you design a cover. And here's a macrobiotic plate. So here we've got brown rice, and I'm sure many of you already know this, but I'm just showing this in case not everyone is familiar with this way of eating. The beans are the protein, and you notice these are black beans. And I want to leave you today with the thought that black beans matter. Then we've also got broccoli, so greens, which are more of the yin kind of vegetables. Then we've got squash and carrots, we know the yang, and there's some seaweed there. Seaweed is very important because most people have a deficiency of minerals, and mineral deficiency makes it hard to think properly. So it comes back to an original idea I brought up, which is that for spiritual progress, it's important to eat the right foods. And if you don't eat seaweed, it's very likely that you have a mineral deficiency. It's very hard to get those today, even with organic vegetables, to get enough minerals. Seaweed is loaded with what's right. Some people are afraid of them because of a toxic potential there, but when they are resourced through organic food channels, they are well tested, they're well examined, and there's no problem. So that's nothing to worry about there. There's only one thing missing on this plate that I would say is very important for health, and that is there's no pickled vegetables. In other words, sauerkraut, cucumbers, whatever, just sour, because what really decides your health, both mental and physical, is your gut bacteria. It's that simple. Now, this insight is only about 10, 15 years old. This isn't really, well-established old stuff. This is cutting-edge new stuff. We know that the way you eat will determine your gut bacteria, and your gut bacteria will, through the vagus nerve, will influence your thoughts and your ability to think in a harmonious way or in a chaotic way. So imagine all the people taking antibiotics now. When you take antibiotics, it wipes out the gut bacteria. So it makes it very difficult to be healthy. Here in Stockholm, the biggest Swedish daily newspaper sent 2 journalists out to 10 doctors. They each went to 10 doctors, and they told them that they were getting a cold, and it was slowing them down, and they wanted to get some antibiotics because they had important things for their job and their career, and they just couldn't afford to get sick. 9 out of 10 doctors prescribed antibiotics. Now imagine, antibiotics cannot stop a viral infection. Antibiotics are for bacterial infections. Now, how can someone study medicine for all those years and then give someone a prescription for something that's going to weaken them? They're going to take this antibiotic, and it's just going to wipe out their gut bacteria, and they'll have absolutely no protection. In fact, it's going to make it more likely that they will suffer from the cold. So you've got to watch out for the experts. Anyone who lives macrobiotically is skeptical of experts. So this is what I was talking about, balancing the inner and the outer. So with the food, we balance our bodies, and with this, we can balance the energy around us. Like right now, I'm in Stockholm, Sweden. It's very gray, what in Japanese would be called yin ki. There's a very yin kind of gray, damp unpleasantness in the air right now. This is not the best month of the year to be in Sweden. A couple of weeks from now, I will fly to Australia, and the summer starts there on the 1st of December. So I will switch from yin ki to yang ki. Yang ki is warm and sunny. And so I will also change what I'm eating, because I need to eat one way to balance the yin ki of Sweden in November, and a different kind of food to balance the yang ki of the Australian summer. So here, I'm almost done with my marathon now. Hang on with me here. These are called the 3 treasures, which I think is a very good, let's say in a nutshell, what we need to take away from this understanding of Oriental wisdom. The 3 treasures are, first of all, Shen. Shen is spirit. It's located in the heart. This is, in the Orient, people think of the center of you as your heart, where we would think of like somewhere behind our eyes and our brain. They think of the heart as the center of the person. Now, this is spirit, and this is the mind. So, and if you read in the middle, it says, if we look at it in the Western way, we could say that Shen is the mind, Qi is the breathing, and Jing is the body or the physical substance. So what I was just talking about, the macrobiotic food, that's Jing. And if we have meditation and proper thinking, in other words, we don't waste our time with chatter or gossip. We make it count. What we say, we make it count. That's strong Shen. And Qi is the energy we get from having strong Jing and strong Shen. Qi is what keeps our body going. It's like it's an electric current. Like if I would unplug the computer now, everything would go dark, because that's the energy that's keeping this computer going. And the Qi is what keeps us going. And when we don't have much, we become weak, like a very poor electric source. So you can read some of these connections here, like at the top. Calming the breathing, the spirit gets centered. Abundant Qi then gives you a powerful conscience. So we can see that when you've got the energy, it's going to fire your consciousness. It's going to make you able to really take that leap into the unknown that comes beyond. And if you eat the proper food, that will strengthen the Jing, which, according to the Chinese, is in our kidneys. So weak kidneys are a sign of, let's say, lacking Jing, because the kidneys are not strong enough to hold Jing. And of course, Qi is that energy we have when everything is working well. So then comes the concept of the astral plane. Now we'll see this in some of the teachings, like the Eckankar and the Summit Lighthouse, that when you die, you actually, first of all, encounter an energy field that's very close around. It's called the astral plane, which is kind of a chaotic energy. And what you want to do is make your body so powerful at all levels, physically strong, mentally clear, have a spiritual vibration that's very high and clear, that when you die, your spirit will take a great leap through the astral plane into what's beyond that, because the astral plane is a bit chaotic. I've seen a couple of really interesting programs on TV. One was in Germany several years ago when I worked at the clinic. A man who liked to drink at the pub with his friends. He got in the car and started driving home, and he had an accident, and he died. And he was suddenly out of his body, and he met some men that came walking by, and they told him that they looked confused. Come with us. And he said, well, just leave me alone. I'm trying to get away. I don't know where I am. They said, no, you really should come with us. And when he refused, they got more aggressive. In the end, he said, no, I'm not going with you. Then they started attacking him. One of them pulled his arm off and started beating him with his own arm. And he then had this flash of crying out to God to help him. And when he said that, they told him they'd leave him alone, just he shouldn't say that again. Then he was pulled back into his body because the emergency medical team saved him. And he's now a minister, a pastor. And he said that his drinking friends thought he just got a bad bump on his head because he had a total change in personality. Well, I found this story to be interesting. And then about 3 years ago, I read about an atheist in San Francisco who had a heart attack. And he had a heart attack and died. He suddenly was standing there, and a group of men came by and said, you look confused, you better come with us. And he said, no, leave me alone. And it was the same story, except that this time, instead of ripping his arm off, suddenly one of them just lunged at him and bit a piece of his body, just took a chunk of his body out with a bite. And he did the same thing. He called out to God. And they immediately disappeared. So when I heard this second one, I thought, this idea of the astral plane, I think, really exists, because what happened with these people, first of all, being in a state of intoxication with alcohol would prevent you from having that kind of power that you need to go through the astral plane and get out into the higher octaves, the higher levels of consciousness. And of course, being an atheist, you would have no idea of anything spiritual. And so he just landed there. And the funny thing with him, when he told his story, was that his friends in the atheist movement were really disappointed because he dropped out. He got back from that trip. So that's the astral plane. And so people who abuse drugs, people who abuse alcohol, or people who get involved in things like Ouija boards, spiritualistic things, can end up in the astral plane. So what this means is that when we go beyond the veil, we really don't know what comes. But what we want to do is balance karma by good works, helping others, being nice to ourselves, not harming ourselves, having a clear mind so that when we get old, we don't have dementia. If you have dementia, you'll have no power. You can't make that break through the astral plane. You need to have that power to go through it. And we can do it if we spend our lives focused on that, so we take that step beyond. And then I'm sure that when we get beyond, we'll be very surprised, first of all, of what's all going on there. And that we will probably be shown what our previous lives were, why we lived the life we did, and that if we haven't balanced our karmas, that we don't need any further earthly lives, then we'll probably come back and do it again. And hopefully the next time we'll learn more than we did last time, so that we get better and better at it. So thanks for joining me. There's kind of my idea of what happens when we die. We just kind of float out there, and we want to keep ourselves very focused and young minds so that we do everything right. If you want to contact me, there's my email address. And I will go back to the picture here. Let's see. Well, that was quite a long one. I really enjoyed this because I didn't have to rush. Yeah, I usually would try to do that in an hour. I could have done it in an hour if I'd been fast, but I took my time and just smelled the roses on the way. So where should we go from here? Should we go into some questions and answers or discussion? How would you like to do that?
Yeah, I think discussion sounds even better than Q&A. Of course, both are welcome, and maybe the same thing. Several of us have been trying to unmute, and I've been furiously remuting them. So now's your chance. Or anybody, I don't care. A good way to do this, since there's a lot of us, is if you want to raise your hand. And sometimes that'll put the hand sign up, or sometimes you can on the bottom there. There it is. Michelle has raised her hand. And let me just say, anybody who didn't figure that out, I think there's a hand raise button somewhere. And okay, let's begin. If you don't find it, let me know. But let me remove this pin. There we go. Hey, that's me. Michelle, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Garnett. Nice to see you, Garnett. Nice to see you. And Stephen, nice to hear you. I've heard you many times before. And I have a question. When it comes to, I've been doing a lot of research lately when it comes to schizophrenia in the gut, the microbiome. And I know macrobiotic diet addresses this in hypothyroid. So I'm thinking that's just a condition where it's not static beings. What would you say as far as, I don't know if this is in the line of the questions you want to answer today, but what would you say that is as far as spirituality is concerned, and what's a way to fix that? Because developing more into more schizophrenic could probably be damaging the brain. So anyway, any thoughts? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think the question is just fine. I'm very interested in food and this connection, so I think the question is right in line with the topic. What I've come to understand through the years is that the condition of the gut is really decisive for how everything goes, whether it's physical or mental. And the two things that are most devastating to the gut microbiome, which is the word that we use for the gut bacteria, is first of all milk protein, cow milk protein. It's mostly cow milk. It could be other animals, but that's the most common. And gluten, especially wheat gluten. Dr. William Davis wrote a very good book called Wheat Belly, where he describes how wheat affects the gut. I would recommend the book to anyone, Wheat Belly. It's great reading. You won't want to eat wheat when you've read that. And it comes down to the very basics in the gut, and it's like this: when the gluten has contact to the intestinal mucosa, it inflames. It creates inflammation, and this inflammation, if it's happening regularly, like people eat wheat daily, if it happens once, your body will recover. But if wheat is the most common food, when I was recently in the States, I found it hard to find a bread that didn't contain wheat. Even the rye bread was wheat and rye. So what happens is this inflammation creates chaos in the gut lining, because the gut lining is only one cell thick. It's extremely fragile, and it's protected by the mucosa. Without the mucosa, we would be doomed. And so we have goblet cells in the gut lining which create the mucus. And there's also a substance called zonulin, which is secreted, that keeps everything going properly, so that the cells will open up. They're called tight joints that open up, and they will allow nutrition through, but nothing else. And when this gets to be inflamed, now, of course, wheat gluten and milk protein are just a start. Nightshades will do it too. So how about a cheese sandwich with a nice slice of tomato on it? And, so when you take that, then you get chaos. The zonulin doesn't work properly, and the gaps enlarge. So they get large, so that now not only nutrition gets through, but you get antigens coming through. You get pathogens, things like the gluten that get into the blood, and then you have inflammation coming. And the problem with this is that's a barrier. The gut is a barrier, but there's also a barrier called the blood-brain barrier. And the blood-brain barrier will let anything through that the intestinal barrier lets through, because it needs those nutrients. So when the gut barrier gets damaged, then you're now opening yourself up for an inflammation in the as a reaction from the immune system. And these inflammatory substances will now go through the blood-brain barrier, and the barrier is there because the brain is extremely sensitive. And when these substances get in there, then they'll inflame the brain, and this is when you'll have things like schizophrenia, just mental illness in general, or even dementia and Alzheimer's. So, there is information. I used to read some of the scientific information from research, but this was before internet. I had a whole stack of paper about the effects of wheat gluten on schizophrenia. So as soon as you asked that question, that was found to actually trigger it. So no one would say, how can just wheat create that? Well, when someone is sensitive and let's say vulnerable, because I have a very good gut system. If I eat wheat, I notice nothing other than that it's a bit heavy, but I have no reaction. But the effect on other people who don't have that strong gut will be that can trigger it. And, I think that psychiatry would get much further if they would pay attention to what's called nutritional psychiatry. It's a new branch of medicine. And it's like the experts are always the last to know. We've known about this connection between food and the psyche for a long time, but psychiatrists haven't. They've been trying to imitate what doctors do, which is prescribe their patients out of their problems, and it doesn't work. What it does is it accelerates their tendency to dementia. And what nutritional psychiatry now has discovered is that food is the most important factor in your psychiatric condition. And I think we're going to see some great things happening in the next years because of that, because it's like the dam is broken now, and they're starting to understand it. Of course, the failure of conventional psychiatry, and then now these insights that are coming from psychiatrists who are thinking outside the box, as they say.
Yeah.
I've seen people recover from mental problems many times by just changing their food. And of course, wheat gluten is the worst, but I would say if someone's got schizophrenia or even any kind of severe mental problem, I would cut out all gluten, even rye and spelt, because wheat gluten has made the gut so gluten sensitive that there are even reactions to harmless gluten. I find that oats work fine. Oats, there's a lot of discussion about oats and gluten, but I find that gluten sensitive people, almost all of them, do fine with oats. And then of course, rice and millet and quinoa, buckwheat, there are plenty of other alternatives too, but see good results with that. It's really, hopefully we'll see more of that in the future, because it's serious. I read a really interesting book by what was her name? There was a psychiatrist in Portland, Oregon, who wrote a book called The Crazy Makers. The Crazy Makers. It's really good. She noticed in her clinical experience that young people, especially, were getting crazier all the time, and she began researching and found that there were 13 neurochemical toxins in baby food. That when they were getting their baby food, that they buy in jars all pureed, that when their brains were being developed and their nervous system, they were getting all these toxins. And it's just, absolutely a shame. She said she was very pessimistic because she was seeing that the more and more craziness with younger people. She's been doing this many years, and those who are now a little bit older, they're not as crazy as the younger ones coming up now. It's a snowball effect.
Yeah. Lastly, I just want to say that I did hear now that you brought this up at Denny's Waxman's, he had a big online thing, and he had brought this doctor who said that it was eating too much meat that was ruining the lining in the intestine. It's the meat eating. We're attracting microbiome that eats our cells. That's what he said.
Well, that's right too, because we know that it takes fiber to create a healthy microbiome, and meat has no fiber. No animal protein has no fiber. So if you eat meat once, you'll get away with it. But when it's meat every day, then you will create what's called bacteroids. And bacteroids are the harmful bacteria that are also called decay bacteria, and they will do exactly that. They will cause harm. They also secrete things called lipopolysaccharides that are toxic, and they become part of the toxic load the body has to get rid of. When you eat carbohydrate, then you get the fiber, and that's what the good bacteria thrive on. And then they create the short chain fatty acids, and then they support the gut lining. And I mean, that's what I do, and I'm sure that's why I'm still doing so well. You know, I just sometimes can hardly believe when I think of all these years of just unending health I've enjoyed, and how lucky I am that I found this out at a young age.
Thank you.
So I've posted, thanks, Michelle. I posted Steve's email address again. Someone wrote in the chat. There is another question before we get to you, Sylvia, just a moment here. And that question is, someone asks, could you say more about nightshades and nicotine? She didn't know that she thought nightshades have solanine, but wasn't aware of nicotine.
Yeah, sure. That's a good question, because I have found that when I do macrobiotic coaching, the nightshades are the most sensitive topic with people. You know, you'd think it'd be sugar, like giving up sugar, but when I tell people to stop eating tomatoes and potatoes, it's like they go into a state of shock. And the point is that all nightshades are cousins. They all belong to one group of toxic plants, and they all contain glycoalkaloids, and they're all a kind of nicotine. So nicotine is a close relative of solanine. So you have solanine in both the tomato and the potato. They used to call it tomatine, and they discovered it's actually solanine. And I'm sure that this resistance to giving them up is a bit like telling a smoker to stop smoking, because they just don't want to stop it. And say they're just these red things. You're not going to eat them anymore. We'll eat some other things instead, but it's not that simple. So, first of all, solanine, if we want to focus on that now, has a very nasty effect on the body. It creates a lot of inflammation. And so when you study how people get sick and what makes them healthy again, we find that inflammation is the basic illness. Like when you eat non-organic food and you swallow the glyphosate and the pesticides, what do they do in the body? They inflame. They're not supposed to be there, and they cause inflammation. Well, inflammation causes oxidation, and oxidation is the basic illness. So if you're oxidated, you'll get sick. A good book by Dr. Thomas Levy is called Curing the Incurable, and he talks about vitamin C as a miracle cure, because it basically will neutralize the oxidation created by all these toxins or other inflammatory substances. So what I have found over the years is interesting. That is that people who suffer from arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, they are the best witnesses to speak about the inflammatory effect of nightshades, because if they take them once, they will have an attack again of their pain that is gone. When I worked at the clinic in Germany, it was mostly cancer patients, but we did have several rheumatoid arthritic patients, and they were our best successes because the patients stayed for 6 weeks. And you don't cure cancer in 6 weeks. You can certainly make an impression, but you can't stop it. It takes longer. But the rheumatoid arthritic patients, after 6 weeks, many of them were totally pain-free and symptom-free, and it made a big impression on everyone. In fact, the administration of the clinic considered having a department just for arthritis, because they were seeing so many people recovering. Well, that's what does it, is getting rid of the nightshades. And we had so many people come to the clinic saying, well, I eat only organic food. I don't eat meat. They're already doing, I don't eat sugar. They were doing these things that generally people would do to be healthy. But the one thing they don't do is stop nightshades. And that's why they never get better. So I can assure you there's a life after tomatoes and potatoes. In fact, I found that the patients at the latest, after 3 or 4 days, would comment how surprised they were that they had lost their attraction to potatoes and tomatoes. It takes just a few days to get over the addiction.
Thank you, Steve. Norio writes that he's been on a ketogenic diet for, I forgot quite how long, for a while. So we can hear about that. Sylvia, go ahead with your question.
Not a question,
Comment.
comment about schizophrenia. All of us remember that George Osawa cured this in Africa. The groups that were developing schizophrenia and impossible for their family members to control, he discovered they were eating